Brothers and sisters, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The Pharisees went off and plotted how they might entrap Jesus in speech. They sent their disciples to him with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. And you are not concerned with anyone's opinion, for you do not regard a person's status. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." Then they handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." At that he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." The Gospel of the Lord.
As we were preparing to hear the responsorial psalm sung, Deacon Peter was asking what this wooden thing was that they were setting up. It's called a riser for people who aren't tall enough like me, you know. And on the way back, he asked me if he wants to set the riser up for me now. Maybe we need that, I don't know. But, you know, didn't Sadie do a fabulous job with that psalm, huh? And all of them, they're belting it out today, exuberant. It's beautiful, absolutely, beautiful. Yeah, give them another round, absolutely. So, what is negotiable and what is non-negotiable? I don't care what age we are, we know what that means. What is negotiable and what is non-negotiable? Now, when I was a kid growing up, how many of you remember brand names? You're going to show how old you are, all right? You know, how did we make our Christmas list? From the brand names catalog. That's what I used to do. And I was a good person because I even put the item number and page number, you know, and I would bend down the page in the catalog. I still have a brand names catalog. That's why I have all this stuff at the rectory. I can't part with anything, you know. And as a kid, you know, made my Christmas list, if it was for Santa, if it was for family, there was the negotiable part of the list and the non-negotiable part of the list. There was the part of the list that I had to have. Absolutely, these were the gifts it had to be. And then, of course, if we couldn't have it all, there was the part of the list that was negotiable. I can make do without this. Huh? So as kids, I think we know that. Maybe as we go into our teenage years, there is the negotiable and the non-negotiable when we want to do different types of sports or go to different parties or events. There's the negotiable list. I can make do without this one, but this I really have got to be at. And we, you know, work on our parents in an appropriate way in those negotiations, huh? The negotiable and the non-negotiable. And as we get older, we have the same thing. If we go to buy a car, go to buy a home, there's the negotiable list. I can make do without these things, but there's the non-negotiable part. I got to have this. I can't make do without it. And in business, of course, anyone in business, you know, we do negotiating all the time. And both sides will come to the table, the things that, you know, absolute it's got to be, versus if I got to give a little, it's on this side of the coin. This is what I'm going to give, the negotiable, the non-negotiable. Well, we think about that. What are we willing to compromise? What are we willing to give up? What are we not willing to compromise? What can we not give up? And if you think for a moment, take that whole idea to the reading, to the gospel in particular, and there's some details there that are very important. We hear that the Pharisees are at it again. They're after Jesus. We hear very clearly they want to trip him up and trap him. But then we pepper in that the Herodians were there. It almost comes in through the back door. And if you do not know who the Herodians were, they were a whole separate group other than the Jews. And the Herodians and the Jews hated each other. The Herodians and the Pharisees hated each other. There was absolutely no negotiating between those two groups at all. The Herodians were very much in favor of the Roman Empire and Roman authority and Roman rule. And anyone who was Jewish was absolutely not in favor of Roman authority and Roman rule and Roman law. They were completely different groups of people, and they hated one another. But what is the best way to bring two groups together who hate one another? We learn this also probably at kids. Sometimes we don't all get along when we're kids. You find a common enemy, right? If you find a common enemy, then you can bring two groups who don't get along together. And that common enemy for them was Jesus. Both the Herodians and the Pharisees hated Jesus. So he was the common enemy, and they posed the perfect question to trap him. Absolute perfect question. The question, is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not? Perfect question. Perfect question, because if Jesus said, well, no, don't pay the tax, then the Herodians would have been after him and said, well, you are going against the Roman Empire. You're going against authority. You are almost committing treason, if you will, and they would have been able to report him to Roman authority. On the other hand, if Jesus said, yes, pay the temple tax, well, then the Pharisees would have been after him, and they would have said, well, you're not really a faithful Jew. If you're really saying pay the tax, you're not a faithful Jew. Jesus is between a rock and a hard place. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. And so Jesus has the perfect answer. And I believe Jesus, the first person in all of recorded time, said, show me the money. That's what he said, show me the money. And they handed the coin. And he said, well, whose picture is this? Well, it's Caesar's picture. Well, whose inscription is this? Well, it's Caesar's inscription. Well, that's Caesar's picture and Caesar's inscription. It must belong to him. Give it back. But, there's always a but give to God what belongs to God. And so Jesus is really telling the people, give to God what belongs to God. Two very important things Jesus did in this answer. Number one, he honored the role of society and government within society, the role, the place of those in charge, their duty to rule. He honored that. He did not go against government authority. But more importantly, he called the Jewish people, remember who you belong to. As a Jew in the covenant, you belong to God. And for you, for me, from our baptism, we belong to God. We have a mark in us. We belong to God. And Jesus is saying, God is inscribed in you. You belong to him. Well, the simple question maybe for us to think about is, what are we willing to negotiate in our relationship with God? And what are we not willing to negotiate in our relationship with God? Because all of us, I don't care if we are in elementary school or high school, or if we're in the workforce or retired, all of us daily are put in situations where we are called to compromise at times. We are called to make a decision. Is this a non-negotiable way for me to live, or am I going to compromise and give in to what others may ask? A few thoughts to share with you. You know, this weekend we had the parish retreat. Over 500 were here for Friday night and Saturday for Father Michael Gately. It was a wonderful retreat. And on Friday, when we were done here in church with Father Michael, one of our college students spoke with me, and he told me, he's a sophomore in college, told me, he's become quite the topic on campus. And as he was sharing the story with me, he said, now mind you, this was Friday, he said tomorrow, so for us it was yesterday, Saturday, he said, tomorrow will be 5-year anniversary for me that I signed my chastity card. So as a high school student, I signed a card to remain chaste. And some on campus have kind of found out as I talk about this, and people are coming up to me now asking me to see this chastity card of mine. And of course, for him it was a non-negotiable. He is living a chaste single life. And really for all of us as Catholics, it's non-negotiable. We are single, if we're married, we're ordained, we're religious, we're called to live a pure, holy, chaste life. That is non-negotiable. The last Mass, her parents were here sitting on the side, but one of our grad students from the parish went off to an Ivy League college. I won't name the school to protect them, but she went off to an Ivy League college, and in her undergraduate time, she did the unthinkable on campus. The unthinkable. She started a pro-life group. She and a couple other students and a couple faculty at this Ivy League school went and started a pro-life group, and bringing home the message of the respect of the unborn as well as the ill, the aged, the incarcerated, was not well received at all and under great persecution, but was a non-negotiable because in her life, especially, she said the unborn, all human life, is so valuable and important. This is non-negotiable. And for all of us as Catholics, it's a non-negotiable. We have our Adoration Chapel, and every day I walk by it many, many times and go into the chapel every day, and there's always somebody there. And now I'm going to blaspheme in church in one moment. Even on the days where there is snow. I know I shouldn't say that word. But, even the days that there's snow, and so much snow that the parish is closed and school is closed, and I think, has the choir begun praying for snow days this year? Have you? I know I have. I would like a couple snow days. And, even though the parish is closed and there's a driving ban, they're still in the chapel in prayer. It's a non-negotiable. They don't really care. It is their hour to spend before the Lord in the Eucharist, and they are going to be here. It's a non-negotiable. They trudge through feet of snow sometimes, and they are here. A non-negotiable for us all to live that life of prayer every day. One of my former assignments, one of my teenagers, he's now actually a teacher himself, went off to a Catholic college out of town. He was not in Western New York. And every Sunday around 10:30 or so, I was guaranteed a phone call because the college he went to, when he would come back from the chapel, they were not exactly following the proper practice of the Mass. And I would get a phone call from him every Sunday, and he would tell me the latest thing that happened. And then I would arm him with all of the code numbers of canon law and all of the paragraphs from the general instruction of the Roman Missal for him to march in, which he did every Monday morning, march into campus ministry and bombard them with questions about why they weren't following canon law and the Roman Missal, and gave them all the paragraph numbers, to which I gather they were quite impressed and wondered how he knew so much about canon law. And but for him it was a non-negotiable. We are not going to tinker with the most important prayer of the church, the Eucharist, source and the summit of our lives as Catholics. We're not going to toy with that. It's a non-negotiable. We have to celebrate the Eucharist in communion with the rest of the world and to do so properly. One last example, Pope Francis, Pope Francis, if we think of just one thing that we will always remember about him. Hopefully he's got many more years and many more gifts for us, but one thing we are always going to remember is his care of the poor. He's always calling us to look out for the poor, the marginalized. He's always calling us live a simple life so that others can live. And he's always calling us be kind to the poor, be generous to the poor. It's a non-negotiable. We have to be of service to our brothers and sisters in need. Well, the list can go on and on. I think the examples are clear. And the simple question, what is non-negotiable for you in your faith? What is non-negotiable for you in faith? Hopefully you will never negotiate your life of Christ away. But if you are willing, what is that you will be willing to negotiate away? As we pray that we see our life with Christ and his gospel is non-negotiable.